Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the third and last talk in our short series of talks under the title With a View to North Wales. And I'd like to thank people who have made a donation to contribute to the very modest fee for our speaker. Before we go into the talk, just a quick note, we will record this talk as we have done with the previous ones. And you will find the recordings on the RPS YouTube channel. And to access it, you either go to YouTube directly, look for the RPS channel, or you Google the names, or you go to our regional website and you see a number of tiles. And down at the bottom right, circled in red, we have a listings of all the recorded talks. You click on them and it takes you to YouTube. Now back to Robert Law. I'll keep the introduction very short. Robert has visited us last autumn, where he's given a fabulous talk on his project on Holyhead, a local port town in North Wales. Rob lives in North Wales and he works locally and engages with the community, and so comes up with fantastic projects. And tonight he's going to tell us about his approach, how he does photography. And without hogging the channel any further, I will hand over to Rob.
Thank you very much. I'll notice your introductions are getting very slick now, Rolf. So it's it's working very well indeed. Thanks everybody for joining. I am so honoured. I can't even believe that people want to, well, that they come back again for second helping. So let me just go for my screen sharing. And Rolf, could you just give me a quick thumbs up that you can see my screen successfully shared?
That looks great, thanks.
Fantastic. Okay, so I've called this presentation Create, Collaborate. And it's part of a trilogy of presentations by our happy little group called the North Wales Project. And basically, we're a group of 5 photographers, 3 of whom have presented to you, who are interested in promoting photography in North Wales from the region, mainly documentary photography, photography that tells stories, and to provide an alternative view, and also to promote our own work, because that's what we're here for as well. So just to quickly recap what we were doing, basically, the first amazing talk was from Ethan Beswick. He talked about questioning photography in its own way, about how to look at your own surroundings. And, oops, sorry, I need to get the hang of this. There we go. That's Ethan. And even asked what a photograph is and what reality in a photograph is. And it was really thought-provoking for me. As a documentary photographer, I'm interested in capturing things as accurately and honestly as possible. But Ethan clearly proved that all is not what it seems. Then we're very lucky to have a presentation then from Hazel. Now, Hazel teaches photography for a living, and she gave an absolutely barnstorming performance. And I recommend that you do look at the RPS YouTube channel if you missed either of these talks, and look back at them repeatedly if you want. They're fantastic presentations. And I was particularly happy that Hazel was able to give a talk, because she is very much involved in looking and interpreting her surroundings in a very different sort of way, including landscape, which I know a lot of people watching tonight will be interested in. She talks about drawing influence from fictional works such as Ivanhoe, and also her fairly well-known work now from the female mountaineer Gwen Moffat, and her guidebook, or her memoirs, of which you can see the text sort of extrapolated and put down at the bottom of the picture here. I should say that Hazel's been extremely modest, actually, because later on this September, there's going to be a touring exhibition that she's part of in Germany. It's by the IKS Media Archive. And it's a showcase of British documentary photography and photographers. And if I mention some of the other people in this exhibition, you'll understand how big it is, because it has Daniel Meadows, Neil McDermott, Homer Sykes, David Hearn, Tish Murtha, as well as Wales's Mohammed Hassan in that. So well done, Hazel. It's just amazing that we've got you with us, and thanks for that presentation. So, okay, I'm just going to quickly admit there we go. I get little pop-ups on my screen as well, Rolf, to admit new members joining, because I've got the admin thing, haven't I? There we go, create, collaborate. And the first part of this presentation is about creating, and that's a picture of one of my neighbors in the village called Sophie, painting her NHS tribute rainbow right in the middle of lockdown when everything was extremely scary and we couldn't see the light at the tunnel at that point. And that was a project on my own village when I was stuck here called Village Lockdown. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But what I want to talk about is part of my journey as a photographer has been basically stepping up to produce series of work. And it's something that if you're not doing already, I really want to try and encourage you to do because it's great fun. Now, we've all made loads of pictures and we've not known where the next step should be. We may have plenty of disconnected photographs, and that's great. We may have quite a large portfolio, and that's great for showing, for sharing, maybe on social media, maybe attracting some likes. But that comes to a point that we can't take any further. So we're going to talk about how to think about our work in terms of series. And if you just bear with me, I just need to minimize a little window there. That's gone. Cool. I can see my own screen. Now, cohesive series are strong when images connect. So when you have a series of images that either look the same or have a woven narrative through them or have a certain amount of meaning or are telling a story, I think that when they're all connected like that, they become incredibly strong. I thought about the analogy of a honeycomb. It's not a very good one, but by virtue of the fact that a picture is in a series, that picture has more inherent value, I think, than it would from being a single image by itself. And projects, they have greater longevity, they have archival value because of the stories they tell, because of the history they record. And so they're more persistent, they're more likely to be viewed, shared, printed, published, exhibited down the line. And that won't happen when you've got a pile of individual good photographs, no matter how good they are. You're just not going to get there. And as a documentary photographer, it's all in the storytelling and narrative. And that can be really a very emotional subject. We can deal with life and death subjects. It could also be an agent for change. You can have things publicized. You can be an advocate, or you can use advocacy through photography to change situations in people's lives, or whatever cause you believe in, or anything you want to highlight. And series also, as I mentioned before, can reflect historic change, and then they become documentary in their own nature. I was just thinking, even the really worst photograph you can imagine, if it's a picture of something that's then wiped out the next day, then that photograph becomes incredibly valuable. It really doesn't matter how good or bad it is. So that is the nature of recording things as well. And I just want to touch quickly on the democracy of photography. It's a term used quite often now. Everybody is a photographer. Photography is democratic. We all have smartphones, we all take pictures, but it's a good thing to think about using it responsibly and doing it well. So, okay, you might be thinking, okay, I can start working in series, sure, Rob, but what are the outcomes? Well, the outcomes are actually really tantalizing, and it's this journey I've been on. And if you haven't taken that step, I really want you to come along with me because it's so much fun. I mean, at the very lowest level, you can talk about an online feature, maybe on Instagram or Facebook. Some people are very, very good curators. So actually being featured maybe on an Instagram takeover or just any sort of feature can be quite a big deal. Or maybe you might be interviewed about your practice. There may be an article about a project you've done, and that's fantastic to see your work shared to a wider audience and then get some feedback from that, from your peers and from all sorts of people. And of course, it's so gratifying to see your work in print, and it's easier than ever before. Photo books, okay, they're a bit more of a pinnacle, but zines, and I struggle with the word zine because it implies that they're magazines. They're not. Zines are small books. They're often digitally printed, but they're on quite hard, well, thick paper, soft cover, and of very, very good quality and quite easy to produce. And it's great to see your work in print. It's something you physically thumb through and you can hand to somebody else, which is great. And of course, to see your work hung up in an exhibition, either or online in an online gallery. And I was just thinking, you know, would I ever want a solo exhibition? Well, that'd be quite nice. But you know what? Group exhibitions are far more fun. And now we'll talk about that in the collaborate side of this this talk. Because talking to other photographers, comparing your work with others, and seeing people look at your pictures and comment in the flesh is a fantastic thing to happen. That is a really good outcome for your hard work. And if you're minded to, series of things you can submit for awards. Now, there is the question of validation. Do you need it? Don't you? But it is quite nice to have that once in a while. But I do say with the caveat that a lot of awards and competitions out there are just the complete non-entities. They're made up things with made up juries, and they have no kudos, and they're just there to make you money and nothing else. But there are a few awards like Portrait of Britain, etc., Taylor Wessing, that may be worth considering paying a bit of money. There are awards that give all their fees to charity, and they're very good as well. But I definitely would recommend submitting your work for anything free, which is great. And it's good to curate your own work and chop it down, and it really helps you focus. And while we're talking about producing work in series, I mean, who's it for? Let's be honest, a lot of photo books out there, they're only bought by other photographers. But if you want to access that wider public, I think if you can get a really good balance between narrative and aesthetic, in simple terms, a strong story that everybody's interested in, and really good photographs to illustrate that, then boom, you've made it basically. And I think a lot of us would like to do that, and that's where your photography really skyrockets. So I'd just like to talk about connecting existing work you've got. I mean, a project, you can read a lot of synopses about projects that will talk about, oh, this is a very specific project about religion, about existentialism, and it has loads of flowery words. And you think, how on earth did they come up with that? Well, let me tell you something now. People do the project first and they will write the description afterwards. Okay, they will do the project first and write the description afterwards. Now, to a certain extent, they may be focused on what roughly they're going to do, but I'm telling you, the writing will come at a later date, because when you start getting involved in the project, then that reveals things and you research. But we'll talk about that as well. So it's okay also for a project to grow organically. As you go out and you take photographs of things that interest you, people, places, you can look at your complete portfolio and you'll see connections between pictures that you hadn't probably seen before. And again, you can be gathering images completely ad hoc, randomly, and a body of work, I promise you, a project could be nascent within your Lightroom catalog. Of course, that means you need to take a camera with you, and it's a good habit to get into. But I said before, actually, if you get tired, just put your camera down for a couple of weeks and pick it up. And that is the beauty of photography, if you're not depending on your camera for a living, of course. And then when a project takes hold, research is vital. Talk to people, do what specialize, become not an expert, but do have a decent grasp of your subject, and that will be very rewarding and enriching as well. So, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I shoot digitally as well as analog, and I just dump stuff periodically into different folders and in the Lightroom catalog, and it's much like a light box. But you can look at that in the same way that maybe even look at your Instagram grid, and you may notice projects forming of their own accord. Now, I just did this yesterday, and these aren't projects. I just quickly looked at a random folder, a couple of random folders on my Lightroom catalog, and I thought, oh, okay, old things, damaged things. And all of a sudden, just from a grid, you can start connecting. I'm not saying this would form a project, and here's another folder. And we'll do exactly the same thing of things that catch our eye. So, okay, well, I thought, oh, red things. Here we go. Some bright, vibrant red just popping out of the frames there. Now, I wouldn't do a book or a series on this, but it does give you an idea that when you do review your work and you do look at it, patterns can form, and that can lead you to some very interesting places. So what sort of series can you do? Well, I'm just going to give you some ideas, and these are some ideas I've not even tried myself. So they're worth thinking about. And this word typology is something I've known about these types of collections for a long time, but didn't actually know what the word for it was. So basically I asked one of my mates. And typology is a classification basically according to general type. And when we're using that photography, we're talking about maybe a collection of somebody did a book, I still can't remember who did it, of roundabouts, telephone kiosks, post boxes, all the same kind of thing. And it's quite an interesting form of series. And in the late 20th century, Bernd and Hilde Becher they were German contemporary artists, did a lot of this kind of thing, basically. It was mainly sort of industrial artifacts that they photographed. A lot of it was actually coal mines, including a lot in South Wales, and then placed them, as you can see, in grids. So again, we've got a combination of fairly mundane, banal, not so banal objects, but by the fact that they're presented together and you can examine the nuances between each individual photograph, it becomes immediately more powerful and more interesting. So we're talking about that honeycomb already, aren't we? We're talking about the strength of a series. And what's particularly interesting of the work of the Bechers is that a lot of these things aren't here anymore. So you've got a double benefit. So it's a historical document as well. Now, on Anglesey, there is a lady called Kaz Alexander. And now Ethan and I are part of an exhibition in Cardiff at the moment called Many Voices, One Nation 2, where there are 12 Welsh-based photographers showing their work. Now, Kaz did a series, and it's My World Through Glass. And we see some fairly mundane and at first sight, not particularly interesting, perhaps, images through a window, different times of day, slightly different times of year. But when you read about Kaz and her life, the project's transformed. She is basically housebound 24/7, 365 days a year. She can't go out by car. It says my trips to hospital are by ambulance. This is Kaz's complete world, taken with an iPad or she has, I think, a Canon SLR. So every little nuance, every little change for Kaz is important. And when we look at it, we're struck how profound that is. And I hope Kaz gets to see this recording later down the line on YouTube, because Kaz, you've done very well. And this is the amazingly powerful expression of photography and Kaz's own resilience and persistence and a drive to create within her own limitations. And when we look at these pictures, we realize that that's you know, a very, very powerful statement. And absolute kudos to Kaz for producing this work. And if you're anywhere near Cardiff, you can go and see that in photo gallery along with mine and Ethan's work. So moving on, Adrian's a photographer just down the road in Beaumaris from me on the Isle of Anglesey. And Adrian's done a lot of landscape work. He has a degree in photography, but he'd sort of not fallen out of love. He hadn't done much over the years until he moved to Anglesey a few years ago, and immediately got stuck into our fantastic landscapes and produced some very, very nice work, and has his own online gallery, which is a wonderful. I do recommend you go and have a look. But anyway, as a side project, he started looking at benches. And he phoned me up a couple of weeks ago saying, Rob, I've got to just somehow get a series of benches chosen for publication. And in Wales, we have a fantastic print-only publication. It's called Offline, and it's a wonderful photographic journal. And if you don't subscribe to it, I highly recommend you do. Anyway, Adrian was chosen to present some of his bench project pictures for this. And look, we see the landscape, but we see it from the viewpoint that we'd see it as well. It's really, we're sort of stepping out and being an onlooker of an outlook, basically. And I think this is fantastic. We have some really quirky images included here. So again, this is typology. It's the same kind of thing. And in a way, I recognize a lot of these benches as well. I recognize this one right in the middle of Anglesey. So it is, yeah, as I said, it's typology, and it actually, in a way, informs me a lot more about my local area than, say, a generic landscape picture would. They have their place, they have a different purpose, but this informs me very, very well about my area. So other sorts of typological series have included Great Little Tin Sheds of Wales by Pete Davies. This was exhibited in Oriel Colwyn in Colwyn Bay a couple of years ago. Large format pictures in black and white and colour of these stunningly varied corrugated iron buildings all throughout Wales, from barns to shops to pubs to just about everything. A lovely, lovely series. And going down to South Wales, Paul Cubberts in South Wales, who we will mention a little bit later as well, has done many typological series. These are just two examples, and you can see that he is highly Becher influenced here, because on his website he presents them as a grid, and you can click on each individual image and they will enlarge. And on the left we have television repeater stations or transmission masts, and on the right we have double electricity poles. Individually, they're quite mundane, but when you look at them together, they're a record. I'm telling you now, because I worked in broadcast for nearly 30 years, television masts will go. They will be an artifact, and possibly power lines as well, as they get buried underground, and our national grid changes shape and character. And funnily enough, there's a book by Cafe Royal Books that featured a combination, curiously, of the transmission masts on the left and another series Paul did of monuments to mines. So you'd see the remains of winding gear and stuff left to denote places where mines used to exist. And they were presented side by side in the book. Monuments and both of them in their own way. Great, great series. And just very quickly, Samuel Ryder, I've been in touch with him over Instagram recently. He's been in touch with me. He does some fantastic work, just hair dryers. And look at them, they're like jewels. They have been exhibited worldwide. They've been in the national press, and they're wonderful. He does a series of phone kiosks as well. So typology is Samuel's work, and I think he is actually originally from Wales, possibly from Cardiff. Forgive me, Samuel, if I made a mistake there. So you want to do a series? Well, the easiest thing to start with is looking at places, and North Wales, what a place. And clearly a lot of landscape photography comes out of where we are, but I chose to have a slightly different look at it. And I know a lot of you will probably have been to Dinorwic Quarry, but that's one of the few places I visited for a series called Snowdonia Revisited. Basically, the series is very simply about how man has changed the topography of Snowdonia, North Wales, not specifically within the national park, because a lot of these areas are either circumvented or just are on the side of the national park. But wherever you go in Snowdonia, man, since prehistoric times, the prehistoric farmers started chopping down trees and creating fields. Lots of felling of woodland in the Middle Ages, and then later on quarrying, obviously in this case for slate, and in this case for rock. This is actually part of Penmaen Mawr quarry, which originally there was a flint factory up there in Neolithic times, but more recently, in the 20th century and 21st century, stone has been quarried there for building. There's actually a bypass in Hamburg that's actually filled with stones from the quarry in Penmaen Mawr. And talking of things, a lot of us are drawn to sort of piles of stones. They're sort of like, I like them because they're like little mini landscapes in their own right, little small mountain ranges full of character in the same little valleys and cums and everything else that we used to seeing. So give me a pile of stones and I am a happy photographer. And that's a blast shelter from the same quarry. And again, Penmaenmawr quarry. And finally, that's a hydroelectric scheme in Snowdonia. That llyn is called Llyn Mawr, and the mountain behind is Carnedd y Filiast. And it's sort of incongruous. It's a national park. It's a highland area, and it's again a modification of a wilderness. In fact, is there such thing in Snowdonia as wilderness left? I guess not much. We've got a lot of erosion even on the very highest summits. So it's not exactly as was. So I found it quite interesting to examine that. And so anyway, outcomes, we'll talk about outcomes. That was actually submitted and featured for Inside the Outside, which is a fantastic website. I highly recommend it. And it's a website that's concerned with place, and a lot of the work it does include landscapes, but not in the conventional way that we look at them. So it was a great honor to be included in that, and that was February 2018 already, a long time ago. And the synopsis underneath there, if you want to read it fully, please go to the website and have a look. But it's all about change and what is revealed underneath the peat, the bracken and heather as a result of man's industry, and the new topography that we can see as a result of that. So there's a signature image of the talk I've given. Now, we're talking about place still. I was working in Llangrannog, which is a village on sort of southwest Wales coast, but this is a view to North Wales. Of course, you can actually see the Llyn Peninsula vaguely at the very horizon of the picture. Only just, but it is there, I promise you. So I'm letting this one through the net. And that's actually an artificial ski slope. And I was there for a day. It's the Urdd camp. The Urdd is if you're not from Wales, it's a national cultural youth movement, and they do have a camp with outdoor activities for kids. And I was actually there working on another project, but that was right in the middle of the COVID crisis, so there were no kids. And I was staggered by this place in an area of outstanding natural beauty. The juxtaposition of natural ski slopes, of artificial ski slopes and this lovely rugged coastline. It was most strange. So I had about an hour and a half to wander around with the camera, and it was actually a film camera, and being 6x7, it had 10 exposures. So I didn't have many chances to actually snap away. So I had to make every shot count. And I wanted to capture the characteristics of this place. So this, again, was a project that wasn't a project. I was just in a place, and I was documenting a place that I happened to be in for literally a day, and I had an hour and a half to do this. And where do you take it? Well, I'm shooting for fun. I'm shooting for my own pleasure. It's something I could come back and expand and enlarge for a larger project if I ever wanted to. And that's the final shot, looking north again. So what was the outcome of this? Well, there was a call for entry from a group called the Work Horse Collective, who are a group of ex-Goldsmiths students. And they made their first magazine called the Work House magazine, or Werkhouse. And they had a call for entries, and the theme was called The Artificial. So I thought, goodness me, maybe these images from Llangrannog might fit in nicely. So I submitted them. And as you can see, a lovely 2-page spread there. And they used every single image I submitted. They had a limit of 5 images per person. So hugely gratified to get in there. And so that is an outcome. Creating as well. So we talk about place. We have communities as well. That picture is a couple of neighbors again during lockdown. Because I'll just talk briefly about my project Village Lockdown, that we were all obviously confined to where we lived, and we could exercise once a day. So I made the most of that and took my camera with me. This picture, a couple of neighbors in April when it was pretty cold. There was a very stiff breeze. We live on an island. There's some cold wind coming in, but they managed to grab a bit of sun in the garage and enjoyed a very large gin and tonic each, and were quite happy for me to just take a quick picture of them. So village lockdown was basically all I could manage to do without going anywhere. I literally stayed within the confines of our parish for about 3 or 4 months. I had to go once for work when I was allowed, but otherwise I was at home and just walks. And pictures like this started to form where I got the idea of isolation, of barriers, and also of community. Again, hedges, boundaries, seclusion, where people were locked away in their houses. But also when we all came out, it's the friendliest period I've ever known in my life. Everybody was really keen to talk to everybody else, and we made so many friends within the village and got to know so many of our neighbors and people. This is Gwen, who was a botanist. It turned out she's also an artist as well, and it's been nice to follow her on Instagram and stay in touch. And some abstract pictures just to fill in the series as well. And that's Llandegfan Football Club's new signing. Of course, the football pitch was deserted for a very long time. Again, that's part of the narrative of the series. And that's Gary, one of our neighbours, with his old English sheepdog. Deserted playground. Again, documentary photographers, I must admit, we do like our hedges, don't we? So they're quite nice. I like the way I think the way they're groomed, and but they do present a barrier as well, but also enclosed, and they're sort of hugging the buildings. They kind of have two functions visually. And of course, your NHS tributes. So I had a gun to my head. I either shot images of my village, or I just basically would have put the camera away and stayed indoors for a year. I had no choice. And I was determined I wasn't going to stop taking photographs. And normally I can't take photographs of somewhere that's so familiar. But like I said, I had a metaphorical gun to my head, and I found it, once I started, I got into a bit of a rhythm of shooting, and I was seeing things that I'd walk past every day. But because I couldn't go anywhere else, I had to shoot those things and start noticing them. And I included portraits. And again, portraiture is an important part of storytelling if you can. And I just wanted to include this picture of Bob because he passed away. I only found out a couple of weeks ago. He passed away last year, not of COVID at all, simply of old age. He'd been in the RAF in World War II. He'd been a lecturer in economics, and he was a lovely man. I'd met him for the first time. Charming. We spent about half an hour talking with each other, and he didn't mind me taking his portrait as he waited for his wife to pop off the bus with the shopping. So it just shows you what a privilege it is to be able to meet people and take pictures, and the responsibility that comes with that as well, to their memory in the case of Bob. And it's just a huge honor. Again, the outcome was a zine, or I call it a small book, again, called Village Lockdown. It sold, well, it was a limited print run, about 150, 200 copies. It's all gone now, unfortunately, but that was a lovely thing to be able to share with everybody and to shout about, and some permanent record of this really extraordinary year and a half that we've been in, or longer than that. So I want to talk about very quickly, I'm just going to reach now, if you look at my thumbnail, if you're not looking, but there's a book called Scaffold to the Moon by Hugh Alden Davies in Carmarthenshire. Hugh I know. He's produced a very interesting book. He has a slightly eccentric father who is extremely inventive and has led a very interesting life. But what I wanted to quickly mention was the way that books and series actually don't all have to be photographs. They can include artifacts, things you find, old photographs, bits of paperwork. And Hugh's used that extensively throughout this book, as you can see on those 3 quick pictures I've taken from there. So I had a quick go at that yesterday because I was doing this talk. I thought, well, let's just try it. I had a picture of a hotel room that I took in Pilsen in the Czech Republic, and stuck on a magnetic board we've got in the house as a memento. We've got 2 tram tickets from Pilsen as well. So I thought, what do they look like together? Well, yeah, it's not going to get me a prize or anything like that, but it's just an idea. Maybe you might want to try after this talk and maybe assemble a couple of things together. And that's just a picture I took of Bryn Goran and Anglesey and a fridge magnet. Not so good. I don't think that's going to go very far, but it was fun just trying. And that was literally lunchtime yesterday. I thought I'd do that very quickly. So using objects. So still in the create phase, you practice. How are you going to make that series pop? How are you going to make it sing? What can we do? This is what all stuff that I've learned basically. And I know that, well, I think that if you have consistency and continuity, they're quite important. You'll have your own way of seeing. And that should come through when people look at any of your photographs once you start fine tuning. And I'd hope that that row of photographs at the bottom, people will be able to say, oh yeah, Rob took those. I haven't invented anything special, but I think generally when you look at my portfolio, hopefully you'll have an inkling that, that I might have taken the pictures. And one way to get this consistency, for me personally, because I'm not clever enough to do a lot of things, is remove a lot of variables from the camera. I shoot with just a 50mm lens or equivalent. I can't use zoom lenses, and I won't use too many variables on the actual camera. I'll keep it as simple as possible, simply for that consistency. Again, and I'm not being self-deprecating, I really am not clever enough to control a lot of variables. I used to be awful with a zoom lens. I don't have a single zoom lens now. My photography was all over the place. I couldn't handle it. And the same actually comes to editing and processing. I have done a small amount of darkroom processing, and I try to do stuff on my computer that I'd be able to do in the darkroom. I don't take it any further than that because it can completely corrupt the message and the image, and it produces more variables are the more inconsistencies there will be in your work. So keep it simple, unless it's your intention to manipulate, and that is part of your narrative. And these are not rules; these are just things that have worked for me and may not for you. And more methodology. As I mentioned before, it's scary for a lot of us actually thinking about leaving our comfort zone of taking pictures of places and inanimate objects and actually approaching people for that fear of rejection, that they might say no. Generally, they don't, not in North Wales. We're all very friendly here. And it's so enriching. And again, as I showed you with that picture of Bob, it's an absolute privilege to hear about people. And it's an important part of your research, talking to people. These are 4 people from the Holyhead project. I can tell you the names. It's Emrys, standing in front of the pub. That's Kevin, as the station master in Holyhead. That's Mary, who's a charity worker in Holyhead. And that's Adriana, who works in a cafe in Holyhead. I know all their stories. I know a little bit about them all. And they told me plenty about where they live and what their lives are like as part of my Holyhead Sea Change project. And very quickly, scope of your project, it can be really, really local. But I was just thinking, it sounds lazy, but it isn't. Joseph Kuldika did a series on Wales, and he just did the whole country. I mean, Martin Parr's done something on Scotland. You can widen the scope of your project as much as you want. To mention our friend Mohammed Hassan, who came from Egypt to Wales quite a few years ago. He's done a fantastic series. It's called Witnessing Wales, and it's his view of a country that he's absolutely besotted with. And he's a first-class photographer, and the series has been featured on BBC Wales recently as well, and I certainly commend it. So it can be as wide as that. He lives in Pembrokeshire, so he could have just done My Pembrokeshire, but he's done Witnessing Wales. You can enlarge and narrow the scope of your photography as much as you want as for your project. These are just more sort of tips that have worked for me. I always enjoy looking for quirky things, and I guess a lot of you do as well. They really do help gain attention, and they're great as part of a sequence of a project. And quirky things and things that ask questions as well. These are, again, 3 pictures from the Holyhead series. There's a kid's chair. I just saw it by the breakwater. What was it doing there? It was set up. It was brand new. It was just left. Why? who did that picture of a tiger? Why a tiger, and why on Pebble Dash? Was it not a nice wall to paint on? I've no idea. And thirdly, why is that sign saying Stanley Crescent? Why is it just 6 inches off the ground? If you want to find out why, you'll have to listen to my Holyhead talk on the RPS. I explain about that. But quirky things that ask questions of the viewer, are fantastic elements to form a series of work. As is documenting the unseen or the overlooked. I get a real kick out of looking at things that people ignore and won't photograph. The misplaced door, the row of garages, the pile of pebble dash and a brush. And I'm going to talk about very quickly sequencing. And it is a visual language. Sequencing is something that'll be covered in a complete different talk from somebody who knows about it and not me. But so I gave a call to my friend Ryan Trower, who studied photography, and he gave me a great quote from his lecturer Geraint Cunnick from Ravensbourne University, and talks about photographs like reading text on a page. I mean, we're hardwired to read from left to right, and in a book, for example, photographs can do the same. And just to quickly read, text uses punctuation to indicate pace and flow. It tells us when to stop or pause. It tells us when sentences end and when the new subjects begin. So it basically goes on to say that they can be treated, as punctuation marks, full stops, and the way you arrange landscape and portrait or square format pictures actually act as punctuating this visual sentence. So it is another visual language. It's one I've got to learn, and I've got to work hard at this, but it's something to move on to, and I will be using my collaborative friends, which is where we go on to this side of the talk, for advice on that. Because collaboration, no man or woman is an island. We rely on everybody to advance our photography. And the best thing about our photography is definitely the community. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing without some very, very dear friends and new friends and old friends, people I've met. And the very fact that I'm here talking to you now is an expression of that community. And again, I'm so honored that you're joining me and Rolf tonight. And you've been listening to the North Wales Project presentations. It's a fantastic world we live in, and I'm a bit starry-eyed about it, but it's my favorite bit of photography altogether. And I wouldn't have be doing what I'm doing now if I hadn't had a mentor, and that mentor's name's Timothy Nordoff, and he's got an honours degree in photojournalism, and he is a work colleague. And we spent every Saturday an hour for the last 7 years odd going through my photographs and talking about photography. I was all at sea before I met Tim. I had no focus. I didn't know anything, and everything I'm passing on to you tonight, most of it has come from Tim. If you can find somebody who's had a formal education and wants to share some of that with you, who can go through your work with you, who can recommend photographers to study, people to look at, it's so worth it. But if you can't, whatever stage you're at, if you want to review other people's work, peers, even if you're right at the very beginning of your photographic journey, why not get together with somebody at the same stage as you, because you're both going to be asking the same questions at the same time, and you both be able to share the answers that you both find. It's a lovely way to grow your photography and review each other's work. Ask why a photograph works, why it doesn't. Say, Tim, with me, even if I produced a bad photograph, he wouldn't say that's a bad photograph. He'd say, Rob, do you think that photograph works? And I go, and he'd say, well, why? And I couldn't tell him. And I'd get to the realization, yeah, it's a bad photograph. And it's a lovely way to teach. And I'm indebted to Tim. So again, collaboration, form your own informal collective. Why not? I mean, an Instagram account is free, or a Twitter or Facebook account. 2 or 3 of you get together and show your work together, bounce off each other. It's great fun. And that's what we've done with the North Wales project. And the idea of coming together and pooling your work, that strength got us very kindly through Oriel Colwyn, an exhibition which is fantastic. And the exhibition was all the stronger because there were 5 of us exhibiting. If it was one of us, it wouldn't have been half as interesting, although the work from everybody else was fantastic in its own right. But the combination of all of us was great. Now, you can see Rog on the left, then there's Ethan, Hazel, myself, and Philip. Well, everybody apart from myself and Rog, they've got degrees in photography. What a great idea to be able to call somebody up and say, look, can you just tell me what this is or that is? Can you just recommend a bit of help here and there? Rog is actually a real whiz with IT anyway, so, and he's a great photographer in his own right. But everybody has different strengths, and that produced quite a fantastic combination. So thanks to Oriel Colwyn for letting us exhibit last year. Is it last year? Oh, it seems ages ago. And so consequently, we've got quite a vibrant Instagram page at the moment that's being curated and run by Ethan. We've had a couple of account takeovers. We've shown our own work, and we've shown work of photographers producing work that we like in North Wales, stuff that has taken our interest. So you have a collective. You could actually engage with other collectives. We did this with the Basement Collective in Swansea, and we actually had a little photo conversation between North and South Wales, and I just simply started up an account here, and we produced a few diptych photographs of chitter-chatter photographically between us. Of course, you know, engage in social media through hashtags, through local zooming in, whatever techniques you can use to network with people who are like-minded. We're not members of the RPS, but those of you who are, I know there are plenty of mechanisms and you're paying for membership, so use them, you know, engage, join specialist groups, and exploit that as much as you can. And again, the RPS, as I mentioned in my Holyhead talk, the great thing about the RPS is they're encouraging people to work in terms of series, obviously for their awards, for the licentiate and the ARPS, FRPS, and so on and so forth. So they're geared towards making people, encouraging people. Sorry, they don't make. You want to make work in series, in terms of series. And through social media, etc., you know, build up your circle of friends. People who might be able to see how to. I have not an idea about printing and paper, but I know who I can call straight away about which paper to use for what sort of printing. I know I can give Roger a call about studio or lighting work, or my friend Mark Hillier, who has his own studio in Yorkshire, full-time professional. So another fun thing about collaborating, it can be between 2 or 3 people, is a photo conversation. Now, these are great fun. It's a bit like having a pen friend. The outcome can be published as diptychs, for example, or you can simply take a roll of film out of your camera after you've exposed it, post it to somebody else, and they can run it again through their camera. You can get some like amazing double exposures, and it can be quite exciting. But photo conversations can often happen where one photographer posts or offers a photograph, and then the other one produces an image as an answer to that question. So question, answer, to and fro. Now, I did this over lockdown with a German photographer called Christina Stone, who's based near the Black Forest in Germany. Now, we'd known each other before, and I love Christina's work. She's won loads of awards. She's highly educated. She has a master's in photography. She studied in Westminster, and she's the photography is of a very, very high standard. But she was basically stuck in her apartment. I was stuck in my village, so we started a quick photo conversation. She actually at the time didn't feel comfortable enough to actually go outdoors with the camera, because people would have thought under the strictest lockdown it would have been quite frivolous. But we managed to pair off photographs. This is one of my favorites. That's a lamppost on the left in Llandegfan village where I live. And Christina actually went down to a Lidl or Aldi and bought some silver straws and just placed it in that shake. I mean, that's a fantastic pairing. So if Christina's with us tonight, thank you very much. Vielen Dank. And so on. It went, bouncing back and forth. And these were eventually published on a website called Stay at Home. And it was a German pair of artists who collected or invited I think, a couple of hundred photographers to pair off either randomly or with people you chose to have these photo conversations. Fantastic. Great fun is the photo walk, and I'm sure loads of you have done that, but it's great when two of you go to the same place and see what things catch your eye. Sometimes as photographers, we do zoom into the same things, which is quite amusing, but it's interesting to see how you interpret different things and places. And Ethan and I have done a couple of these now. This is an example in Old Colwyn. We weren't familiar with the area, but the pictures you can see are different interpretations. On the bottom there's one of mine, and then two of Ethan's. Top right's Ethan's as well, and the collage is both of us. And again, mine, Ethan's, mine. And it's quite nice. And I hope as a collective North Wales project, all 5 of us can attack somewhere when restrictions are lifted, and either an event or a place, and see how we all record them. It's going to be really interesting. But you don't have to develop new work. You can actually combine existing work. And last December, I was working near Porthcawl, and I had some time off. This was under strict lockdown. There was nobody there, but I had a legitimate reason for working. It was an essential service at the time. So I took a series of pictures of the Porthcawl seafront. And so on a very rainy December day, in fact, it was a week before Christmas and it was freezing. It was horrible. But then I connected, or a photographer, Billy Charity, who is based in Hay-on-Wye, full-time professional photographer, and she is involved and is running the Through the Lens gallery there, had done a series of completely different pictures, but in Porthcawl as well. Now, Billy is a great people photographer. You can see a passion for photographing people, vibrant colors, and a lot of these pictures were taken in the summer. But as I was feeding a lot of my Porthcawl pictures out on Instagram, she contacted me and said, hey, I've taken that as well. And it was funny how we've been drawn to the same places and same subjects. So what we did retrospectively, I combined Billy's and my pictures as diptychs. So this is actually one frame you're looking at. And the contrast between vibrant summer, non-lockdown, and then obviously middle of winter and lockdown was quite profound. And the more we looked at each other's portfolios, the more we found these amazing coincidences. I mean, it was just beyond spooky in a few cases. But the combinations are absolutely fantastic. And I mean, look at this. See the lady in the red coat at the bottom. I mean, that could have been a caricature of a former self in the 1940s up there on the cutout on the top picture. What a difference. I mean, I was staggered to find that. And that's what happens, when you compare your photographs of a particular place or an area with another photographer. Actually, the one person portrait I've taken is Brenda at the bottom there. She was cleaning up the beach in the middle of winter. I thought it'd be sort of interesting to see or suggest that she's clearing up the mess that the people at the top have made. So, and there we go. I think that's the last one of our Porthcawl series. So you can collaborate and combine retrospective work. So I'm keeping an eye on the time. It's coming up to 5 to 7, so I'm going to whiz through this quickly. Submit for publications. Publish yourself, self-publish. It's quite easy to do, I'm told. Make a call for entries of your own, publish. It's important to connect with academics and organizations where you can as well. Paul Cabot, so I recently mentioned with his series of Becher-esque grid typology series. He also lectures in photography and he's involved with the National Museum of Wales. And he very, very kindly gave me quite a bit of his time over Zoom last year because I wanted to ask about an introduction to printing and publishing and what the trade-offs of that were. And he very kindly spent a lot of time with me. So thank you, Paul, if you are here tonight or if you see this retrospectively. Ellie Hopkins, who was supposed to join us tonight but couldn't, is researching. She's doing a PhD in Glasgow and is looking at whether Welsh photography is looking for threads, whether we're shooting actually with a Welsh accent, particularly with documentary photography. And I was interviewed by her. And also with academics from the University of Cork and Aberystwyth who are running a project called Ports Past and Present, and that ties into my Holyhead Sea Change project. It's been great to talk to them. The implications of Brexit hit the Irish Sea basin ports very, very highly. So my narrative of Brexit and Holyhead was very important to them to look at, and so they interviewed me for a podcast as well. That's available on Spotify. So I've basically whizzed through those because I didn't want to overrun too much. But one picture I had to have, sorry, this isn't Wales at all, but I've got a good friend, Colin Templeton, who is a top flight national press photographer, and he's based in Glasgow. He's award winning, and he's one clever guy. We've done a couple of photo walks together in Glasgow. I texted him yesterday, Colin, can you send me this picture? This is the School of the Art, sorry, the Art School of Glasgow. The Glasgow School of Art got there eventually when it caught fire, was it a year or two ago? And obviously Colin took pictures of the building burning, but this picture, the reverse angle of the people, the onlookers, tells me more about the event than the obvious does. You can see the expressions of horror on people's faces. You can see them holding their hands to their mouths. A guy there in the front wearing a kilt for context. So let's turn our lens away from the obvious sometimes. Yes, let's take pictures of the mountains, the lakes, the lighthouses, the beaches, and the golden sunsets. Let's point them towards our communities. Let's point the lenses towards our people. The overlooked, the quirky, because that, in my opinion, is where the real gold lies in North Wales. That was my presentation. Thank you very much indeed for listening, and I hope none of you have fallen asleep.
Thank you very much, Rob. That was another fantastic talk. It's so important to say these messages, like good stories are everywhere, just look harder. You think you know it all, look again, and something new pops up. It's so important to spread this message, especially when one can't go far, or this quest to go to the iconic, with the funny idea that if you go to the iconic location, you do come home with an iconic picture. Rarely works that way, does it? So please, the audience is of course now invited to ask questions, and either pop them into the chat or unmute yourself and speak to Rob directly.
Rob, hello, it's Abhijit Datta here from England. And I wanted to thank you for a wonderful talk, and to say that your talk encapsulates 2/3 at least of the new RPS strategy, which is inspire. Certainly your talk was inspirational. Connect, which you talked about as the subject of your discussion, and create, which is a product of connection. So thank you very much for straddling the whole of the new RPS 5-year strategy.
Abhijit, I'm honored. Thank you so much. And I think that what you guys do, it's chimed with the aims that I've tried to get over. It's just a journey, isn't it? We want to bring everybody along with us. It's a fantastic community, and my heart sings when I hear things like this and people create and enjoy doing it. Thank you, Abhijit. I'm honored. Thank you.
No, thank you. I should say I'm a member of RPS Council, and I just wanted to ask Rolf if he's recorded this talk, because for those who are not amongst the 41 participants, it would be a very valuable talk indeed to show as an exemplar of how connection between people can lead to artistic creativity.
Absolutely. Thanks, Abhijit, for your comments there. Yes, I am recording. And if I don't experience a technological calamity, the recording will be available at some point. It goes onto the RPS YouTube channel, and it can also be accessed from our website. And of course, I hope that loads of people watch Rob's talk as well as the previous talks, because they're simply gold nuggets. And also Rob's comment on the community, forming a community, is so vital, and it's been in a way easier than ever before through technology, online, etc. And here in North Wales, we're trying to work on creating communities through projects. So we've got the project coming up called Project Frontiers, where we look at edgelands, not usually what you go out and photograph, especially not if you're looking for the iconic, but it's here, it's in our vicinity. You find edgelands everywhere. You can use all sorts of photographic approaches. And so we try to encourage this look again, look harder approach, and also then create communities by forming groups where people interact with each other. They look at each other's pictures, they comment these pictures. So we're launching this project. We have it launched actually as of yesterday, and we're testing the water there. It could go either way, because if you want to create a community and engage with people, you do need people being willing to engage. And sometimes it's like stepping a bit over your shadow, but we work at it, we try, and maybe it'll work out. We'll see.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, Rolf, and Robert again. And of course, communities of learning are well known in educational theory as improving deep learning. And every one of us as photographers are on a journey of learning. And by being part of a community, we enhance our ability to learn mutually. So thank you very much, both of you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Abhijit. Any other questions, comments, objections? It can be controversial, don't hold back. Feel free, we're all safe at our homes, so you can say what you want.
I'm not going to send the boys round, but by the way, thanks for some lovely comments from a lot of people in the comments. So I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Brilliant,
brilliant. I'd like to ask about that point you made about shooting with a Welsh accent. Do you think that is a thing?
You'll have to read Ellie Hopkins' PhD thesis about that, Philip. I use the expression shooting with a Welsh accent. I don't think she has, but she is looking to whether there is a particular way that Welsh documentary photography looks, and it's quite interesting. She basically interviewed me for quite a while, and she's research is absolutely extensive. So it'll be interesting to see what she comes up with. Yeah.
Well, it was interesting. I mean, Porthcawl is a place that I've visited hundreds and hundreds of times, and the way I approached things was just like yourself and Billy Charity, and I thought maybe that's the Welsh accent. Maybe it's a visual slant. We ought to send some English people in and see what they make of it.
Yeah, well, exactly. We'll have to see, but it's looking at hundreds of photographers anyway, including some pretty well-known names, and I think she's looking for threads and commonality between people's practice. But yeah, I'll see if anybody else wants to ask me anything. Thank you very much for that, Philip. Perhaps Ellie was supposed to join us tonight, but she'll be watching the recorded version. Maybe she can respond to you via social media. I don't know. Does anybody want to ask me anything else? I'll just.
Everybody gone silent.
Yeah.
Can be a good or a bad thing.
Well, no, just there's some nice comments, so I know it's not too bad. So, and I do apologize if I've been talking to anybody that is already got up to this level or moved beyond what I've talked about tonight. It's really to encourage people along on this fantastic journey of photography. It's just so much fun. So sorry if I've been too enthusiastic. Anyway. So back to you, Rolf, anyway.
Well, thank you very much again, Rob, for this fantastic, insightful talk. And thanks to the audience for coming along tonight and joining us. If there are no...
Oh, there is one. Sorry, Rolf, there is. Yeah, Matthew Martin has said, in a world where everyone's a photographer, why bother? Well, as I said in the introduction, it can be a very powerful tool and a privilege as well. It can be, you can document change, and if you missed the beginning of my talk, for example, even the worst photograph of something that doesn't exist anymore becomes incredibly valuable. It can also be a form of advocacy to give people a voice. It can also be an agent for change. It can highlight plight, it can highlight inequality. It can be, again, an exponent. So I think photography is extremely relevant, in fact, more relevant than it's ever been. But it's important to do it properly, and it comes with a responsibility. In my case, as a documentary photographer, to be honest and truthful as much as possible, and to be aware that you are basically a trustee of information that needs to be respected accordingly, basically. So that's my answer to you. Thank you. Sorry. Go on, Neil. Sorry. Hi, nice to see you.
Hi, good to see you. Just for firstly say thanks very much for that. I really enjoyed it and I got a lot of it. I just wanted to ask about the zine, the village zine, or book. I don't know if you call it a zine. I've got it, by the way, which is great. But I just wanted to know how that came about. How did you get that?
Yeah.
That's done.
I was actually approached by Philip Butler of ADM Publishing, and he's started producing a series of zines called Collated Observations, basically. I think they're into quite a few copies of them now. He'd seen my work. I think Sam Brown, another photographer I know through Instagram, had mentioned my work to him. Word of mouth, no more than that. And he approached me and, was there any work I'd like to present? And I thought, oh, right, okay, well, I've got this new work, sent it to me, had a look. And he thought, yes, definitely, because it was a subject that other people within his series of zines hadn't covered. So it was different, and yes, it fitted into what he wanted to do. So yeah, it's just social networking, Neil.
Oh, excellent.
I'll just answer a question. Jane has asked, sorry if I missed the answer, but you said you no longer use a zoom lens. Which lenses do you use? I just use, Jane, I just use a standard lens, a 50mm lens or something equivalent to that. It sees as the eye sees. It doesn't distort perspective. And it's, for me, that works. So I'm not clever enough to use a zoom that starts bending things all over the place. But for some people's photography, and I know that Neil, we just spoken to, is an excellent street photographer, and he might want a slightly wider lens to capture everything that's going on in front of him. Many people do. So it's just what works for me, and it's not a rule by any means. I'm just looking for some more questions here.
Just out of curiosity, Rob, you said you also shoot analog at some of the pictures from this holiday camp. I seem to remember you said you shoot analog. When you turn up with an analog camera, you talk to people, you seek the collaboration of the people you portray. Does it change the dynamic if you work digital or analog? Are they more interested if you come up with analog and they think you step out from a different time zone and are more readily willing to engage?
I'd like to think so, but actually I was confronted with a hassle when I was taking a picture of a skate park, and a parent came up to me because there were kids. They had a back face to me, and I was challenged by a parent. What do you think you're doing? And I just smiled and disarmed the situation straight away. I'm doing a project on Holyhead, blah, blah, blah. This camera's older than me, and he was laughing by the end of it. But no, I don't think that has modified the behavior or the way that I interact with people. And it's really important. There's this modification, this influence you have with the camera over people you're photographing. I don't want them to react too much. I like things being as natural as possible. The few of the pictures I've shown, people have a slight smile on their face, but those are the exceptions. I do like a neutral expression. I don't like to modify the way somebody behaves or appears. It's it's undirected, it's natural, and it's documentary in its nature. I'm just reading down more.
We have an
Yeah.
interesting comment from David there. Everybody's a photographer. Can you see that one, Rob?
David Hiney. Everybody's a photographer and takes an image that means something to them. But can everybody take a photograph that has meaning for others? Oh gosh, that's a deep one. What a great question. I can't answer that.
I'm not sure I'm expecting an answer, really.
Sorry, do you want to say that again? Somebody broke through there?
It's David. I wasn't really expecting an answer to that. I don't think it was a question that can be answered. It's interesting that, as you said.
Okay, David, your microphone's a bit scratchy, David, but I got the gist of your question there, that you weren't expecting a specific answer, but I think that's a great question to think about. Thank you very much. And Dewi, diolch yn fawr, Dewi, am y question. Thanks from Anglesey, inspirational. Maybe I should try taking a photograph with a Welsh accent. Wel, da iawn chi, ac yn y iaith Gymraeg os hoffwch chi. Diolch am y gwestiwn, fawr iawn. So asking if, yeah, maybe we should take Welsh photographs. Anyway, sorry, Rolf, I digress.
I know, that's fantastic. We could listen to you for hours. Certainly.
Yeah, and David's just confirmed, sorry, poor connection, and I was not really expecting an answer, but thank you, David, for a great question anyway.
Absolutely, it's one we can ponder about for a long time, and yeah, great, thank you. Any further comments, inputs? Thanks for putting all the lovely comments into the chat box. We really appreciate saving this chat, and then we'll send it on to you, Rob.
Thank you.
Last chance for questions or comments. If not, then I would like to thank all of you again for coming along tonight. I would like to thank Robert for speaking tonight. And we also have Hazel and Ethan in the audience. And I would like to thank them as well again for their splendid talks in the past, which basically made this mini project, a short series with a view to North Wales, happen. Thank you very much. I hope you have planted the seed here for inspirational and collaborative photography. And I wish you a lovely evening and happy photography. Thank you very much for coming along, and take care. Bye-bye. Rob, can you stay on for a minute?
Certainly.